Bleach 1000 Year Blood War episode 36 has finally released, and despite waiting years to see this episode and thinking that I was mentally prepped for what I was going to watch, it still managed to exceed all of my expectations. This week's episode adapts the second half of Mayuri and NEMU's battle against Pernida. Episode 36 faithfully adapts content from chapters 640 to 644, as the first half of the episode adapts Mayuri's ongoing struggle with the Sternritter, with NEMU being left with no choice but to intervene, and this is followed by an amazing flashback scene where we get to learn about the origins of NEMU. This ties into the second half of the episode, which shows us the last stand of NEMU against Pernida, with the episode concluding with Mayuri being taken into a recovery pod, and we see the return of two iconic characters who we haven't seen since Cour 2. Now definitely be sure to stick around until the very end of this video, as I'll also be discussing this week's post-credit scene, which does feature an anime original scene, as well as some content adapted from a earlier chapter that wasn't included, featuring the confrontation between Hashward and Baz B. There is quite a bit to cover, so without further delay, let's dive into my review and analysis of Bleach 1000 Year Blood War episode 36, Baby Hold Your Hand 2. We got really tired of the same old boring anime shirts, so we decided to launch Getsuga.com with the aim of creating designs inspired by our favorite anime and manga. We came up with designs that look cool and represent all of our favorite stories. Check out the latest Instinct collection, which features some amazing designs like this Frosted Heavens design inspired by Toshiro Hitsugaya, or this Instinct design inspired by Holo Ichigo, and my personal favorite, which is the Heart design, which was inspired by Ukiura Shifa. Do not miss out, go to Getsuga.com and wear your favorite stories. Episode 36 picks up with right where we had left off at the end of episode 34, with Pernida breaking out of Mayuri's modified Bankai. The opening scene of this episode is literally a one-to-one adaptation of the manga's content, as all of chapter 640 is adapted before the opening song. They honestly do not hold back with showing how graphic Mayuri's Bankai exploding is. The anime also shows us the pieces of Mayuri's Bankai littered across the floor. While it's not a major change, I do appreciate how the anime staff are not holding back on the gore. Another particular moment that I love from this episode is when Mayuri was weaving through the multiple arrows that were fired by Pernida. This scene in particular was directed and animated incredibly well, as it does a fantastic job of communicating just how fast Mayuri was moving here. The same could be said for the NEMU-centered portion of this episode and the flashback sequence from her childhood, which expanded upon her relationship with Mayuri. All of this was adapted excellently from the source material. I've said it several times, Mayuri vs Pernida's fight did not really need any expanding upon, since it was one of the more fleshed out battles during this portion of the 1000 Year Blood War arc. So the only real thing that I could have asked from the anime is for this episode to have been directed and animated well, which thankfully it was. Adding to this praise, I really love how there's particularly no censorship in this episode, in comparison to the first part of the fight, which featured some really weird zooming in and an attempt to censor some of the graphic scenes, like when Kenpachi was ripping off his arm. Episode 36 doesn't have anything like this because NEMU's death scene is significantly more disturbing than it was within the manga. It was brief, but the anime really sells us on Pernida's nerves infiltrating her body and contorting it in such a way that it explodes from the inside out. Also, the inclusion of the vocal rendition of Here to Stay was so emotional during this part of the episode. I could literally feel the goosebumps when the sad music started to play and Mayuri was reacting to the death of his lieutenant. Another excellent moment during this episode was the grand return of Xyle Opero as a figment of Mayuri's imagination. His voice actor did not hold back whatsoever, as all of the dialogue from the manga was adapted excellently. The vocal performances of Xyle Opero's voice actor Kosuke Toriumi, and the performances of Bin Shimada who plays Pernida, as well as Ryusei Nakao who plays Mayuri, they'd all done a fantastic job with their work on episode 36. NEMU's voice actress Rei Kugimiya did an incredible job of conveying to us NEMU's feelings and emotions here. There's so many great things about this episode, which makes it one of my favorite episodes of this cour. I think we can all agree that the second half of Baby Hold Your Hand was adapted almost perfectly. I think that I'd be lying if I said that the post-credit scene didn't steal the show in some way, but where do I even begin? So you have the first massive reveal that there are still Soldat within Yhwach's Vara Vault, and this is a shocking revelation because way back in Cour 2, Yhwach had wiped out the entire Soldat squad along with every non-hostile Sternritter left behind in the Soul Society. This was aside from Bazby, Giselle, Nanana and Lil Toto who had survived. The anime had gone out of its way to show us that not a single one of them was spared, and that for some of the Soldat, Ushvalin's light literally peeled the flesh off of their bones. During the post-credit scene, we do learn that these Soldat aren't just any ordinary Quincy, but rather they are creations of Yhwach after he had become one with the Soul King. Similar to how the excess power of Soul King Adonius could create life, it appears as though Yhwach has now mastered that ability to the point of being able to create new and more powerful versions of the Soldat. We see this after Lil Toto attempts to take out a few of them, but the black oozing energy of Yhwach restores the Soldat as we see the multiple eyes on their face too. You can speculate several theories on how Yhwach had created these beings, but I am confident that we're going to see them again and they're going to play a significant role, especially in Cour 4. Speaking of Lil Toto and Giselle, unlike the manga, the duo don't just run up on Yhwach while he's asleep. Instead, we have this anime original sequence where they are confronted by the Soldat, which feels a lot more natural in my opinion. During this anime exclusive scene, we do see that Candice and Meninas have returned as zombies. Now this is excellent because for the most part, in the manga version, they were off screen from this point onwards. So if Giselle, Lil Toto and these zombified Bambi survive their encounter with these refined Soldat, it's going to be fun to see all of the Bambis in some way or another face off against Yhwach. Now the episode does end by adapting some material from chapter 630, which is reworked, and this is great setup for what appears to be the big finale fight of Cour 3, which is Bazby vs Hashwald. This was an excellent way to end the episode off, which was for the most part a one-to-one adaptation of the manga. So as always with these episode reviews, let's now take some time to show some love to the talented animators and the staff who had made episode 36 possible. This week's episode was definitely a step above last week's in terms of animation, and it's no surprise because episode 36 featured a very strong lineup of main staff and key animators. Starting with a storyboard from the legendary Suzumu Nishizawa, a absolute boss of an animator who had mentored Dali Chen, the genius who was behind episode 33. Nishizawa is easily one of the most accomplished names in the anime industry, having storyboarded many iconic anime episodes and scenes. Another legendary animator on this episode was Masaki Endo, a one-of-a-kind veteran animator who has done amazing work as the action and effects animation director for this episode. Now there's another legend who's appeared for the third time in Cour 3, and this is Hiroyuki Horiuchi, and it's great seeing such a big name appear consistently within Cour 3, and it really does raise my hopes for what Pyro Films has in store for the production of Cour 4. We also had Young Hon Jung, who returned as episode director this week, and I think that he does a fantastic job directing episode 36 as it flowed extremely well and it manages to hit all of the right emotional beats, with the appropriate music also being played during NEMU's death scene. We also had the trusted Sei Komatsubara on the episode as chief animation director, which is why this episode honestly featured such strong and consistent character art. Now on the key animator side of things, we of course had the return of the rising star Amphibi, the very talented Mitchell Gonzalez, who I suspect may have animated the sequence where Mayuri was dodging Pernida's arrows. In addition to this, we had an assortment of other great animators who've worked on Pyro's other projects like Boruto and Black Clover. Hopefully after briefly going over some of the staff who've worked on this episode, you can appreciate why it had such fantastic action and character animation throughout. Once again, I'm extremely grateful to all of the amazing animators and the staff, and even those who I couldn't mention due to time limits, but I really hope that we get to see them continue to work on Bleach, as they are giving all of us Bleach fans some amazing episodes. Episode 36 does a fantastic job of ending the character arc of the 7th iteration of the Nemuri project. We learn some vital insights about the relationship dynamic between Mayuri and NEMU. We see the contrast between how Pernida develops and evolves via its nerves in comparison to the growth and evolution of NEMU. NEMU exhibits a lot of compassion during this episode, and Mayuri conflicts with this as she assigns herself the mission of protecting Mayuri, with Mayuri refuting this, stating that her objective is to grow and evolve, but NEMU NEMU's perspective is that her deciding to protect Mayuri is an example of the growth that she has undertaken. It's rare for us to see an emotional side of Mayuri, but admittedly we did see that after the death of NEMU. There's a brief moment where he literally stares into space and lets the death of NEMU sink in. And before he can wallow in that feeling for too long, this internal manifestation of Xyloppero appears before him, taunting him about the sadness that he is feeling upon the death of NEMU. He speaks about how Mayuri is hypocritical here, especially after the lecture that he had delivered to Xyloppero during the Hueco Mundo arc on what it means to be a scientist. Mayuri's speech upon perfection, which Xyloppero had relied so incessantly upon, had argued that perfection is meaningless to a scientist. For a scientist to achieve perfection, it is despair. If you're researching and studying a subject, once you reach perfection, you've come to the end, there's nothing else left to do. This is what Mayuri is arguing. In some way, Mayuri didn't want NEMU to die, as he had put so much effort into building her up to what she was. He had even said at the beginning of the episode that throughout the many battles since Ichigo and his friends had showed up, he has ended up teaching NEMU many things. He asks whether she knows the toll that it takes on him, just considering the thought of trying to replace her if something happens to her. This is why this internal dialogue between him and Xyloppero is so incredibly important. Mayuri in some way had conceded that NEMU number 7 was perfect already and he may not be able to top it with an 8th iteration. Xylopero's taunting snaps Mayuri out of his feelings of despair as he works quickly to take back the brain of NEMU, thus allowing Pernida to devour all of the scraps of NEMU's flesh, as Pernida self-destructs because of uncontrolled cell division. If you remember, during the flashback, the 6th iteration of NEMU had died at the age of 2. So this was assumed to be the limit of the cells of an artificial soul. So in order to surpass this limit, Mayuri had modified the pituitary gland of NEMU. He had implanted within it a accelerated cell division organ. This special organ allows her to continually grow and to function, and to bypass the limit of an artificial soul's cells. So to break it down in simple terms, after Pernida had developed the remains of NEMU's body, because it did not ingest her brain, there was nothing to regulate that excessive growth, thus leading to Pernida self-destructing. This is why I love all of the battles which feature Mayuri, as he always uses some sort of biological or medicinal means in order to defeat his opponent. And Kubo does a fantastic job of incorporating all of these really clever science fiction elements into Mayuri's character and his battles, and I honestly cannot get enough of them. So that's my initial thoughts on Bleach 1000 Year Blood War episode 36. The second half of Mayuri and NEMU vs Pernida has a lot of visually challenging moments from the manga, but this episode does an incredible job of effortlessly adapting the manga material. Outside of the really great music and animation, I loved Xylopero's section and the visual style that the anime had used to adapt it. This combined with the amazing voice actors and the emotional music, it easily ended up becoming my favorite part of this week's episode. So what are your thoughts about this second half of Mayuri vs Pernida? Do you think that the anime staff did justice to Kubo's manga? And are you looking forward to episode 37, which has been revealed to be titled Shadows Gone? For the first time in the history of the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime, episode 37 is not titled after a chapter or a manga volume. Shadows Gone is an anime original episode title. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they are going to be adapting the second half of Shunsui and Nanao vs Lil Barrow. We only have like 2 to 3 episodes left for Core 3, and I'm really looking forward to discussing the remaining episodes with all of you. But for now, be sure to continue the discussion in the comments. Let me know what you loved about this week's installment of Bleach, and lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and don't forget to subscribe because I'll be back tomorrow for my manga versus anime comparison of episode 36.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.